Okay, without further ado, welcome everybody to the debaters. An opportunity to mix fun and facts and hopefully not too much food. I am not Steve Patterson, I am instead Don Rettelmeyer. And I am joined by the Canadian physician who always makes me think of getting ready for bed. It's Dr. PJ Devereaux. Round of applause here for PJ. And on my right, I've got Canada's most famous physician, more famous than Gordon Lightfoot, more famous than Gordon Downey, than none other than Gordon Guyatt. Round of applause for Gordon. So much poise, too. I'm impressed, all right? Now, the debate tonight is whereas individually randomized control trials have such awful difficulty recruiting sufficient sample sizes, other people have suggested that doing some en bloc randomization, flip a coin once and then assign an entire group of patients at a hospital, at a physician's practice, at a province, to the same intervention, and then flip it around halfway through. That might be a way forward. So, be it resolved, we should move from traditional randomized individual trials towards cluster crossover trials in the perioperative setting. Dr. Devereaux, you have 2 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be able to be here tonight debating. Gordon Guyatt is like a father to me. He trained me. I trained under him for a long time. And Gordon was adamant in approaching the committee saying, there needs to be a debate. This thing of cluster crossover trials is a big problem. And you know when you hear your father saying something, you think they're starting to lose it? You don't want to have someone else debate them and just like say that they're nuts. You want to do it gently. And that's my goal here today. So I'm really glad I could get to debate Gordon. Now, Gordon actually is going to be saying that individual randomized trials we should keep doing. We shouldn't, and here's the reasons why. Who in this room doing randomized control trials finds it no problem, all the money you want, not problem to get it? No hands. Who here finds doing the randomized control trials individual patient simple to do? They happen so fast like this. No hands. Cluster crossover randomized control trials are the answer. We're doing a cluster randomized control trial right now in cardiac surgery, and we can actually do it for a 20th of the cost of an individual patient randomized control trial, half the time. And the big advantage, I'm against cluster randomized control trials, the cluster crossover, enormous advantage because the center becomes its own control. And that's where all the efficiency comes from that is wasted in conventional cluster trials. This is the future. It is time to tell Dad that he has to stop using the rotary phone. We're now in the smartphone era.
Very good, PJ. All right. Let's hear it. Okay, Gordon, you've been set up as the father figure.
Okay, 2 minutes, 2 points. Number one, you can only do a cluster crossover when it is an intervention that's accepted in the community already. So you're not going to have any innovative new treatments done by cluster crossover. No ethics committee is going to let that happen. That's number one. I was involved in a crossover trial, primary depression, the low dose versus high dose sertraline. It was a cluster. So some of these centers had the low dose sertraline, some had the high dose sertraline. What happened? The patients looked different in the two centers, in the two clusters. Why? Because people did not want to use the low dose sertraline in the more severely depressed patients. So you had more severely depressed patients in the high dose than in the low dose, ruins the randomization, ruins the prognostic balance that randomization is supposed to create. The crossover would not have helped. When they had in the periods on the low dose, they would still have recruited mostly the mildly depressed patients. The periods on the high dose, the more severely depressed. Big risk. After all the trouble, it's a randomized trial. It's not a randomized trial anymore. Turns out to be really just an observational study because people behave differently in who they enter into the trial during the periods on one intervention and the periods on the other intervention. So, PJ, this should teach you to listen to your parents.
Very good. Some truly sobering thoughts there, mixed in with plenty of product placement as well. Okay, PJ, it is now time to attack your opponent with laughs and logic, but not with a laryngoscope.
It is true you should listen to your parents, but you also have to start to say they're starting to lose it. Gordon, we can easily monitor centers to make sure that everyone who is eligible for the study is actually being included at the site. The big efficiency is if you actually can do it, you're not, for certain, individual randomized trial will be here to stay, but we should move as much as we can to cluster crossover. And we should be moving to getting waiver of consent for common interventions that we do every day that no one is questioning. And if we do that, we can monitor the center to make sure that everyone is keeping everyone in the study who should be kept in the study. And then we overcome this problem. It would be enormously efficient. It is in the trials we're doing. This is the future, and we have to move in this direction.
Oh, very good. And within time. Okay, Gordon, it is time to fight back with either bombast or a basic respect your elders.
This was attack your opponent. So now I'm going to attack my opponent. First of all, Juan Carlos from Colombia. Juan Carlos' last name, Villar. PJ and I have been good friends with Juan Carlos for 20 years. At the time, I said, Juan Carlos, how do you pronounce your last name? Answer, Bijar. Okay, I tell PJ, Bijar. 20 years later, he introduces Juan Carlos. It's still Villar. Can't you learn to pronounce the name? Okay. So, that's number one. Number
the
two.
first sign of perseverating on abstract points.
Number two. How many people here have been paid by PJ to come for the vision meeting? He supported you. How many people here? Okay, a big chunk of the people here. PJ's paid everybody to come here, and I'm debating him. Is this fair?
It was the only way I could get people to come to hear you, Gordon. I had to pay people to be here.
Okay, we now move from the bare knuckle round into the firing line. I've got here in my hand 2 questions, one at a time. Okay, PJ, you first. According to the Internet Movie Database, the term randomized brain refers to what? A new werewolf film, a production house, something else? Yes, PJ.
I think this is actually, it's very interesting. This is not a well-known randomized control trial. Donald Trump's parents actually decided to randomize their kids at a very early age to severe brain shaking or just cuddling them and holding them very tightly and being kind to them. They had never broken the code. We don't know who was in which group, but that's what happens where you get this randomized brain syndrome.
Okay, PJ, I will give you 2 points for that answer, and then I will deduct 1 because of that horrible imagery in my head. Okay, back to you, Gordon. The term randomized brain refers to what, according to the Internet Movie Database?
It refers to when you have a debate between PJ and me, and you decide which side is going to take, and we flip the coin, and PJ, too bad, he lost, he got the worst side. But there you go, okay? So that's, we randomized the brains.
All right, I will give you only 1 mark with that, but I will give you 1 extra bonus mark for the excellent body gestures that Gordon has. All right, question number 2 here. Who wrote the song with the lyrics, "No truth in a world that is randomized, expose the lies, no matter how disguised"? Who wrote those lyrics, PJ?
No idea who wrote those lyrics, but I'm personally working on a song that says, "No truth in a world without randomized cluster trials."
PJ, I think you better stick with cardiology. I'm giving you no points for that response. Okay, Gordon. No truth in a world that is randomized, expose the lies, no matter how disguised. Who wrote that?
The person in the world right at the moment most renowned for getting at the truth, Donald Trump.
Well, I'll give you half a mark there because, after all, us Donalds have to stick together somehow. Okay, so now we move to the final statements by each presenter. PJ, it is time to sell yourself as superior.
Okay. You know there's a problem when someone actually puts forward something that's really insightful and smart, but it advances enough in age they forget about it. In 1986, a gentleman by the name of Gordon Guyatt published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine. It was about N of 1 randomized control trials. N of 1 was a brilliant idea. Cluster crossover trials are N of 1 trials on steroids. Gordon should be backing these trials. This was his actually indirect brainchild. And in fact, it was a brilliant original thought, Gordon, and we need to move forward with doing cluster crossover trials whenever we can.
Okay, pretty solid point. Okay, Gordon, one last statement of why you are the one who is really great.
I'm the one who is really great because I see the truth and I'm ready to acknowledge it. PJ keeps sticking to this outlandish position that the cluster crossover is going to solve all the problems. Come on, PJ. Okay? Whereas the appropriate, balanced, mature solution is they have their role, perhaps minor, but they have their role, save money. PJ's very interested in saving money, I know that. But they will have a role, but the traditional randomized trial will still be the dominant approach.
Oh, very good final statement there. Okay, it is now time for the audience to vote.
Just remember who paid for your trip here.
Loudly and with cheers, because our sound meter isn't really all that powerful. So who here thinks that PJ Devereaux is truly the one who is delightful and decisive? Show of hands. Loud, 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 loud. No, not hands. Where's my sound meter? Okay, we got that sound reported. And in contrast, who thinks here that Gordon is both gifted as well as gorgeous? More sound here. Oh, it's got to be a tight one, but Gordon is our winner, but just a tiny little hair. All right?
Oh, this is crushing.
I congratulate the audience in not being influenced by your conflict of interest.
And with that, we will end. Thanks all.